Alison, I'm guessing that yeah, if we need you and we holler, you come back on stage, right?
Yes, I got you.
So, you know, we only have one person here. So welcome, Joan, I think, right? Welcome, one person in person, one person remotely, Joan. So welcome to you all. I'm not sure if you can see me on stage or what you can see of me, and I apologize if it's not a particularly marvelous view, but we will do the best that we can. I'm going to introduce myself really briefly and then pass it over to Tom to introduce him. He can introduce himself, and then I can talk to you. I don't have slides. I'm just going to talk to you, and given that we're such a small and select group, I'm hoping that it'll be a fairly intimate gathering. So my name's Joanna Johnson. I am currently the Director of Writing at the University of Miami. I'm an associate professor there. I've been there for 23 years. I've been there for a while, and have implemented all kinds of WAC initiatives. I wouldn't call it a formalized WAC program, but lots of initiatives that are part and parcel of what we all know and love to be part of the WAC endeavor. I'm actually going to be moving very shortly to the University of California, Davis. I'm going to be the Associate Vice Provost of the Writing Center there. So I'm looking forward to making that move in a couple of weeks. So that's me. I'm going to talk to you today. The panel, I think, is called Using WAC for Student Funding. I'm actually going to be talking about using WAC for, leveraging WAC for securing grant funding, specifically for faculty and clinicians. So it's not exactly, there's a slight advertising breach there, but hopefully that will also be of use to you as well. And I think some of the you know, the techniques and what I'm going to be talking about is applicable to all stages of the curriculum. Anyway, that's me. I'm going to pass you over to Tom now.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks. And congratulations. That's wonderful news. So I'm Tom Polk. I work at George Mason University, where I direct the writing across the curriculum program there. I've been there, I guess, now 7.5, almost 8 years, which seems seems great, actually, at this point. We've been working on a lot of different projects, but I think our main mode of operation at the moment has really been transitioning WAC into a more focused teaching and learning sort of orientation, away from sort of a dual role of WI course engagement and faculty development. And so that has been a lot of fun, and it's been a lot of spending a lot of energy in that. The project that I am talking about today is actually part of my dissertation, which I just finished this past semester. Thank you. And so I'm just going to kind of talk about a slice of that project, but it focuses on students writing proposals for undergraduate research in an undergraduate research fellowship program. And so I guess it's not really leveraging WAC, kind of Joanna, the way you're saying. I'm not necessarily saying leveraging WAC for funding, but really just documenting their experiences in writing those proposals.
So I think actually yours is more in tune with what the brief is in the program. So yeah, I'm the person who's going off piste here. So yeah, I'll get going then. I can't see anybody, and I'm hoping and assuming that Jess, if there are any questions or anything like that, we will be informed in some way. So I'm just going to go ahead and share with you what I have. So again, as I say, I mean, the title of my presentation is Leveraging WAC to Reduce Disparities in Grant Funding. And specifically, I'm thinking about how we really think about that social justice initiative. And I'm going to talk about ways in which some of what we already do this in WAC to a large extent. But I want to talk specifically about what we've done at the University of Miami and what actually I hope to be doing and bringing to the University of California, Davis too, and an initiative that we have implemented there that I think has been very useful. And I'm hoping to see more of that to share it with you. So you know, maybe your institutions can glean something from that too. So, you know, minority scientists and clinicians are underrepresented in most research institutions. We know this. So not only do members of these groups have limited access to scientific careers, And institutions in the first place, they too often find as well that once they arrive, they're not promoted, they're not published, they're not funded as much or as frequently as their white counterparts. And that's even when controlling for other factors. So efforts to change culture and adopt explicitly anti-racist pedagogies and environments for students, instructors, and their community at large within writing studies or WAC have been urgent and necessary, and they are ongoing. Yet I think it still remains for the WAC community to address what actually and practically might be done to reduce disparities outside the WAC field in disciplines other than our own. How do we make our commitments to reducing such inequities actionable, as is a phrase that we hear a lot? In other words, how might WAC approaches and disciplinary knowledge be leveraged to counter inequities in other fields? To be sure, some of this important work is already taking place, but my aim here is to offer an example of specific work, as I said, namely by increasing scientists' rates of funding, publication, and citation. Writing in STEM is often already a well-developed part of the WAC or WID curriculum, but though writing in STEM has seen significant support and development, including supporting STEM faculty members to work with their students in the discipline, there's been less attention to working with the faculty members themselves. Again, I know there is some, but I don't think that there is enough necessarily to support their own writing. WAC could easily focus more of that attention to faculty and students across STEM disciplines. Minority investigators are known to be underrepresented as recipients of government and other funding and in the scientific literature. And it is here that writing programs and departments can play a part in improving the representation of Black, Hispanic, and other minoritized investigators in scientific research. According to the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, quote, among science and engineering doctorate holders with full-time faculty employment at any four-year institution, underrepresented groups are less likely to receive federal grants or contracts than their white counterparts. Again, this is controlling for other factors. In 2015, only 7% of science and engineering doctorate holders employed as full-time, full professors at all institutions were from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. And at research-intensive institution, that proportion falls to only 4%. Moreover, among science and engineering doctorate holders with full-time faculty employment at any four-year institution, those from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups were less likely to receive federal grants or contracts than their white counterparts. So the models controlled for demographics, education and training, employer characteristics, NIH experience, and research productivity, yet they still did not explain why Blacks are 10 percentage points less likely to receive R01 funding compared with whites. Now we know no single individual profession, specialty, organization, or learned society is going to succeed in unbaking centuries of academic and scientific racism, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And it doesn't mean that WAC might not enjoy more traction than others in efforts to foster the aspirations of minority students and scientists. However, of course, there are challenges to this. Writing centers, we're in a position to be able to help, but we also have our own challenges that we know about already and are well documented, such as being historically under-resourced. Financial wherewithal and other forms of institutional support are often supplanted by efforts to leverage resources for low-cost skills, such as mentoring, access to others' expertise in biostatistic or survey design, for example. Writing centers and departments often do not even have full-time faculty experts, where grant writing needs precisely such help. A competent, let alone expert, grant writing expert must, while being a scientific generalist, be able to work with and communicate well with the full range of STEM scientists. And these skills are not generally acquired through experience. They are generally acquired through experience and not through formal courses of learning. Again, I know that there are formal courses of learning, and I know that people do acquire they can take courses in grant writing and those kinds of things, but generally from my experience and from the faculty that I have worked with and that I have trained, and from my own experience, as I say, The best experience comes from actually working with those faculty in those STEM disciplines and the clinicians to really understand what it is they're trying to do. I don't think any particular course can really help you and give you the experience that you need to be able to work with those faculty meaningfully unless you've been doing it for quite a long period of time. And that's something that we in the WAC discipline often, get the chance to do or have the experience of doing. Most of us in the writing disciplines have come to it through writing studies, Rhet Comp, English, linguistics, TESOL, etc. We haven't come to writing in STEM from working in STEM disciplines themselves specifically. That might well be a result of funding models rather than deliberate policy, but the result amounts to the same thing. Experts in writing for STEM are usually writing experts, not STEM experts, at least not initially. Some of us have taught writing in the sciences, or we've worked in a writing center where we have been needed to respond to students' needs quickly, and we have been trained on the job, as I mentioned, supported by colleagues and communities willing to share their expertise. But I'm not aware of any quick route to being an expert grant writer. Courses that do exist are along the lines of learning how you put together a grant, its constituent parts, researching funding, etc., but very little on the craft and expertise needed in the writing itself, save general advice such as obtain an undergraduate degree in a writing field or educational studies, as very kind of platitudinous advice. So though it's widely accepted that clear and effective writing is a key component of success in obtaining external funding, it has not, to the best of my knowledge, previously been hypothesized that writing support can improve or its absence impede funding success for specifically minority investigators. So what else beside writing can it reduce the underrepresentation of minorities as grant recipients? Very briefly, of course, more money to hire Black, Hispanic, and faculty of color. It's a plausible hypothesis, although it entails and has led to competition among colleges and universities, as we know, albeit in the absence of adequate pipelines to deliver the needed candidates. And of course, such financial competition also privileges affluent institutions. So more and local pipelines. After several decades of effort, and one hopes it can continue to do much to excite high school students, some undergraduates about careers in the sciences, and improved access to and training of mentors. Though improved mentorship is already and often a key component of successful scientific careers, there remains the parallel challenges of inadequate financial support, competent mentors, etc., and institutional commitment. WAC, however, is ready. It's ready today. The past half century, as we've been learning about a lot, has seen increased WAC engagement in our academic institutions, and it's grown on campuses in response to greater need for writing in our disciplines. Meeting these challenges requires that such initiatives should, in the first instance, in order to redress the balance as efficiently as swiftly as possible, be directed towards faculty, researchers, and investigators. Bearing in mind that gender and disability-related disparities are as insidious and pervasive as racial disparities. Nonetheless, this work should significantly begin at the undergraduate level. This is a quote again from the NIH, small differences in access to research resources and mentoring during training or at the beginning of a career may accumulate to become large between group differences. So it works the other way. If you don't provide those resources, then the difference becomes huge by the time people are doing their PhDs or postdocs or in their professor positions. So my institution, the University of Miami currently, has been able to respond to scientific writing demand, not least because of the institution's award of a Clinical and Translational Science Institute grant, federal grant, which covers the faculty costs of group-based and one-on-one grant writing sessions. Now, obviously, we've been fortunate to have that. The National Institutes of Health CTSI initiative is under the National Center of Advancing Translational Sciences. So our institution is a medium-sized private R1 university. It has 11 schools and colleges, and there are several so-called professional schools. It has responded to writing support demand via our writing center in the first instance, and as I say, the good fortune of the CTSI grant. And obviously not all institutions have had such resources. Indeed, many, if not most, writing centers are staffed by undergraduate or graduate peers. We have been able to fledge faculty writing groups, dissertation writing groups, sponsored workshops, and used that CTSI funding for sessions with individuals. Most of our clients and participants are white because most of our faculty members are white. As this changes under robust diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, we will take our own advice and institute outreach programs to help ensure the success of these initiatives. So by being proactive and reaching out to those specific groups. Of course, this is not to suggest any one group is in need of additional training any more than another, or that general competency or expertise is any greater in one group of writers than in another. It is simply to say that some scientists, for complicated and long-standing institutional and societal biases, are less likely than others to receive funding. We must therefore give more attention to those scientists. We know that first, funding is crucial to individual and collective success in the greater research endeavor. Second, funding rates increase with attention to and support in writing and communication of that research. And three, a clear way to improve grant success rates is to increase support for those groups and individuals to whom it applies. So based on my experience, these actions are relatively inexpensive and require, I don't want to say no special expertise, because of course I have just said that it does require learning on the job, but no particular expertise beyond what we already have, which is already part of the writing studies arsenal. So what we've done, these are some bullet points of what we've done. We have surveyed faculty affairs and offices of research administration to identify minority scientists who already are successful applicants for external funding. We're developing qualitative data collection tools and using them for interviews with university research leaders. We host university campus-wide webinars using those data collection tools to survey attendees and then target those attendees subsequently. And we host workshops on writing and reproducibility, scientific reproducibility for students and faculty, with special regard for minority populations and strategies for grant writing success. Because improved support for writing will help all investigators, this informs the notion that such support will also address the underrepresentation of minorities in research grant success, and we have a duty to do that. Minorities are underrepresented in STEM disciplines in general, and disproportionately in grant funding and article publication. One source of this disparity, as I've said, is diminished access to training and grant writing opportunities. We in WAC can give those opportunities. We can offer those opportunities. Efforts to better identify approaches and interventions are themselves opportunities to fledge research programs to test the hypothesis that better writing makes for better science. And we in the WAC program have a responsibility to do that. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm happy to take questions, but Tom, I probably, why don't you talk and then we can see if anybody has questions for us both.
That sounds good. One of the things that we've been working on is transitioning our faculty writing, and I've been sort of 50-50 on this, our faculty writing programming, and you're giving me new ideas to think through. So I appreciate that. I do have some slides, so I'm going to pull those up very quickly and then begin. Let's see. Does that look okay in the room? I'm assuming it does. So thank you all again. Yeah, I see a thumbs up. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you all again. So I'm sorry I'm not there in person. Okay, thank you. I was originally supposed to be there, but I had some family issues pop up, and so I'm joining you all online. But I appreciate the interest in the session, and I look forward to the Joanne, as you said, the sort of the intimate conversation at the end of this. If you'd like to follow up with me after the conference, please do so. If you're interested in what I talk about, you can see the link on the slides to the for today's slides, and I'll give you a few seconds if you want to go there to review what I'm about to share. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm presenting a bit of just a slice of a project that I've been working on for the past few years, and which turned into my dissertation. The project or the presentation that I've called for today is called Proposing Entrance, Accessing Undergraduate Research Fellowships. It's really one that's been focused on the culture of writing in an undergraduate research fellowship program at my institution, George Mason. And the project includes sort of a variety of participants, faculty, operating both as mentors and evaluators in that program, and students who are writing project proposals to earn funding to pursue independent projects. So my dissertation, the research that I did, really focuses on that culture and really the concepts of authenticity, access, and preparation as they sort of emerge in the experiences of these various participants, with this broad question of really what's involved in access to and preparation for authentic learning. The motivation for the project originated in sort of several ways. Certainly the relationship between WAC and high impact practices, right here, undergraduate research, WAC's historical interest in access and excellence, sort of that balance of high impact practices and writing knowledge, and just our tradition of writing development. I think that was sort of the original nexus, the original seed of my interest. But sort of the more specific moment that really urged me to pursue this project began 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years. It was June 12th. I started reviewing proposals for this program. And that cycle, I was given 5 or 6 proposals to review. I think about all of them, except for one, came from STEM disciplines, and there was one lone humanities student applying for funding. And I was just really struck by the differences between these proposals. The STEM proposals, to me, overall, they were a sort of varying quality, but overall were just impressive, to put it simply. One proposal specifically stood out to me. The student who wrote it talked about his work on this one particular marine engineering material, which I'd never heard of course, with his mentor, who was this sort of leading researcher on the material and operated this sort of unique laboratory that was one of the few capable of studying this particular kind of project. And so it was a really busy lab that was full of other researchers from Mason. It had postdocs and graduate students, all who this student indicated having relationships with. And they also had this relationship with another research lab at another research intensive university, and on, right? Just this litany of resources the student had available to him. And I was just really impressed by all of this, and thinking, wow, this is really unlike my own experience as an undergraduate. It's pretty much unlike my experience as a graduate student or as a faculty member. And so I was very curious about this student and what that student's experience was. The humanities student evoked something that was much more like my own experience, much more familiar. She had a compelling idea, a very compelling idea, I would say. She wanted to create sort of a limited series podcast about food traditions, the history of food traditions of enslaved peoples from the southeastern United States. She had a very clear stance on the project. She wanted it to be a public humanities project that was widely available. But it felt like she was really working on her own, right? These projects are meant to be independent, but they're meant to be mentored independent projects. And it wasn't clear to me she had much support. And it felt like she was still really trying to develop the project. It wasn't clearly limited and delimited in terms of what she was actually going to do. So to me, I was really hopeful that it would succeed. I gave it a high rating because I thought it had a lot of potential and just thought it was a very good project overall. But I wondered, how did other evaluators view this project, and did it actually get funded? And so that's what really led to me creating this research project. I became, like I said, very interested in these students. Who were they? And the differences among their experiences. Particularly the resources that they had or did not have available to them, right? Were they able to actually take advantage of these resources? Did these resources actually help them access a program like the one I was looking at, like the one I was working for? And what else might have contributed to their preparation? So it was sort of a large set of broad broad questions that I was interested, just trying to figure out really what was going on, who were these students, and how were they really navigating this environment. There is a lot of literature and background to those questions, but really just for time's sakes, I'd be happy to kind of jump in during the Q&A. I'm going to just kind of jump into a snapshot of some of the findings, but essentially by just highlighting two of the students who participated in this study. The first you can see here, her name is Rachel. She was a biology major and was working on an empirical project in the medical sciences. She had a multi-year history with undergraduate research, but was really this sort of uncertain writer, not particularly confident in her ability to compose an effective proposal, though she was successful. The second writer, Kamala, was a writing and rhetoric major, hey for us, and was proficient. She was a confident writer. Her mentor called her one of the best writers she'd ever worked with. And she was working on what I would call an applied literacy education project, but she was really new to undergraduate research and was really unsure of how to frame her project, what the underlying epistemology of it was, and this really caused her to struggle, right? And so the contrast between the two students was, again, intriguing to me. It let me explore sort of that initial interest in in the research site, but it also kind of helped me to think about, one, the preparation involved in that student and how that student really comes to writing and learning in this context, but also how the context or the environment shapes and values that preparation to eventually grant access to the program. And to think through some of those questions, what I use today is just sort of a really simple heuristic of headwinds and tailwinds. And you can probably intuit what that would mean. Headwinds really are things, factors, resources, as you can see on the slide, that were inhibiting or blocking, slowing students' access and preparation. Tailwinds were factors and resources that really facilitated their access and made their access to that program much simpler. So I'll start with Rachel very briefly, or just to say some of the tailwinds that I observed for both of these students really related to their prior experiences. Rachel, as I mentioned, was a very experienced undergraduate researcher. As you can see on this next slide, she actually had experience going back into high school, where she sought out her first sort of team research project. I don't know if we can call that undergraduate research or high school researcher. And that experience and that drive, that interest continued steadily into her senior year when I engaged her in this project. She had participated in undergraduate research at Mason, but she had also done it at several other institutions as well, for I think 3 or 4 different institutions overall. And this sort of set of experiences really allowed her to accumulate a large mentor network that provided her with access to other resources and really helpfully feedback to propel her writing. And so what you can see here is I trace some of that developmental trajectory, which I'm only showing kind of briefly for today, but would be happy to kind of step back and talk with you all about. Kamala's experience was different, right? She did not have that connection with undergraduate research, but her learning and her experiences with her major really did contribute to her confidence as a writer. And she was also able to work with a mentor who was connected to the program, right? Which gave her sort of a rare advantage, because what her mentor was able to do was give her sample proposals, right? The program did not give out in general, but because her mentor had this sort of set on her own, was able to give them to Kamala to review and to learn, what the sort of local expectations for a successful proposal looked like in this particular site. And so again, in my research, I trace her experiences, again, going back into high school. And one long-standing commitment that I realized as I was putting this slide together that's not actually represented and needs to be, is she had a pretty long-standing interest in community engagement and advocacy, which really related a lot to the project that she was working on. Again, she was doing that sort of applied literacy. She was doing a sort of a prison literacy program. And so she talked with me about her experience in high school writing a proposal to request resources for a fundraiser to support a local women's shelter, right? And she really talked about how that helped her to understand what it means to sort of make a request for scarce resources, and that really carried in to a lot of her other writing experiences that we talked about. I do want to step back for a second, though. I mentioned just a minute ago that she was able to review some program proposals in order to learn how to write one. And generally, we would think that kind of thing would be a benefit to her, right? That's a pretty common finding in our research and obviously in our teaching. But what she talked about was actually they were somewhat damaging to her. They actually prompted doubts about her belonging in that program and really caused her to question her research project's fit. And that's really what complicated her sort of framing of the project and confused the sort of what I had called that epistemological underpinnings of her project. And so you can see her articulating some of that on this slide, right? She sees a real gap essentially between what she's trying to do and what all these other students are doing. These are projects that are largely empirical projects from STEM disciplines, right? And I thought that was a really interesting twist on some of the kinds of common understandings that we have about writing and writing development, right? That this beneficial resource, a model text, actually worked against her in this situation, right? Reinforcing those doubts and really strengthening or a perception that research is a science thing, that this program is interested in science, not her work. So she really experiences this sort of what I'm calling an affective headwind, originating from that kind of institutional, tacit institutional valuing of empirical research, particularly in STEM contexts. Rachel, on the other hand, she does not experience that doubt. No student who was operating in a STEM context expressed that kind of doubt. But she does have her own struggles, right? She struggles with confidence, as I mentioned. And that was accentuated, amplified, perhaps, by her first mentor that she talks about as a rather controlling presence. I think the one line in an interview was, I didn't have a lot of freedom in my writing, in my assignments for that mentor. And so again, just for time purposes, what I do is I trace those trajectories, as I said, but then I really start to chart and organize these ideas of headwinds and tailwinds. So here you can see Rachel's developmental resources. She has quite a number of tailwinds, which are indicated by those tiny little green plus signs. Kamala's a little bit more mixed. She has more headwinds, right? Indicated by those sort of red minus signs at the end of each bullet. And so what does all this mean, or how am I making sense of this and kind of thinking about pushing their research forward? And to me, one of the main findings, or the findings really point to this sort of main idea that access is really multi-dimensional, and I would say writing as well, right? That it includes, or as you can see, those headwinds and tailwinds really fell into four categories: cognitive, social, affective, and material, right? And so I'm starting to really see those as very important, or sort of essential to the way we think about access and preparation for learning and writing in authentic contexts. Carrying that forward, I really started to think about how are those dimensions represented in our prominent models of writing development in the field, right? So here you can see Beaufort's well-circulated model, and this one is Tardy's model, both of which apply, or both of which sort of adopt this cognitive perspective, right? There are some important differences, but that's sort of the general orientation of those models, that they talk about the kinds of knowledge that people need in order to expertly communicate, right? And these are models I use all the time in faculty and curriculum development. But what I wasn't seeing them capture the fuller experience of access and success that I was observing in the study. So what I've started to do based upon the research, and this is where I'm going to end today, but we can kind of talk about it in the Q&A, is to generate a different model inspired by the tradition of Beaufort and Tardy, but one that takes what I'm calling a more holistic perspective. As you can see here, I'm arguing or articulating this as the holistic model of writing development. And the model includes, as you can see, the cognitive dimension. That's certainly an important aspect of writing, but it recognizes that access and success aren't only influenced by what writers know, but also who we know. I think, Joanna, as you're kind of talking in terms of the grant writing of the faculty you've been working with, right? Those social networks that support our learning and development or writing and grant us access to resources and opportunities to further our development are really important. Right. This model also includes those affective experiences that I think are really important, that Kamala struggled with quite a bit. Do we identify with the context with which we write or in which we write? Do we feel like we belong? Can we persist through the struggles that we encounter? And can we regulate the stress that writing often brings? Materiality, do we have access to model materials? Hopefully beneficial model materials, the technology that we need, time. One that I often struggle with. Do we have time for writing and learning and time to pursue opportunities that further our development and learning? Do we have the money to afford time? Something that students in this project did struggle with. And then, as you can see, all of these dimensions I've embedded within an institutional context in which they take place. Context with its own values, aims, and limitations, to recognize that access and success are really sort of shaped by those values, aims, and limitations. And I think Kamala's experience really prompted me to make sure that that was represented, her struggle with fit in that program. And so I'll end there today. I went a little bit longer than I was hoping to, I think, but open it up for questions and conversation. And just thank you.
Thank you so much. Just know we have 2 participants in the room who are giving you a big round of applause. Also, if any of our participants have any questions, I'm going to run the mic over to them so that you can hear what they have to say. So y'all just let me know when or if you have questions, but yeah, just wanted to say that. Okay. Might have to say no. I know it's tricky in this room. All right.
Hello, I'm not sure if you can hear me now. My name is Beth. I appreciated both of your presentations very much. And I'm thinking about how the second presentation explains a lot about maybe why the first, in the first instance, there are these disadvantages and inequities that we find later on, you know, for minority students and scholars later. And I'm just wondering, in your research, Tom, if you found that there are supports either through your WAC program or your writing center or somewhere. I mean, I'm thinking about the first presentation, Johnson's, around whether having specific actions around supporting those writers would then level the playing field somewhat. Have you thought about those interventions in your context, or have there been any attempts to help those students develop better proposals?
I have thought about the interventions. I'd be curious to hear Joanna's thoughts, because I don't have any good answers yet. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of times the answers come to time and money, at least at my institution, which I think, you know, has students who struggle with time and money. But yeah, I agree, and I thank you for the question and observations. I think the model does help to explain why some of those inequities exist, and maybe feeds into some of the interventions that someone like Joanna puts forward. And so, you Yeah, I mean, right now I have not put in place anything. I've only just finished this research project. I do think one thing that I would start to like to do a little bit more with the program itself is to think through how do we actually help to rebalance? Because one of the initial questions the program was trying to think through is that there's a majority of STEM students who really think or who really earn that funding. It's over 50% of our university's campus that gets that funding. Humanities students and applied students like business or from fields like those creative fields get very little funding. Part of the issue, I think, really lies in the evaluation. There is this tacit favoring of STEM empiricism, right, where research as empiricism is just the paradigm. And so when you end up with a set of evaluators who look at projects that don't come from that sort of background, they get very confused. And so I think honest conversations and training the way that WAC specialists have been doing for decades with those evaluators is a really good start. Thinking through transparency, thinking about what values we have and how they get articulated and expressed in writing, and then being transparent with the students about that, I think is part of it. But Joanna, I don't know, I'd be curious to hear from you.
Thanks, and thanks for the question, Beth. I think you said. Yeah, I think this is very interesting, and we need to implement a lot more initiatives a lot earlier on, and of course this starts back in grade school. It's not just at the undergraduate level. It happens all the way through the curriculum, and I think we all, as much as we can, have a duty and a responsibility to try and make those pipelines as accessible as they can be. Certainly in relation to what we do at the university level, the initiatives that I've been working on have been to do with the faculty specifically, as I mentioned, but we do have programs as well for STEM students, underrepresented students in STEM at the undergraduate level as well. And this is very small, or at least my contributions to it are relatively small, but certainly every year I'm asked to go and talk to them about writing, and I try to engender as much interest and as much support and positivity as one can. But this is just a very small summer program, and I think it's for the reasons that we've talked about and the reasons that Tom has articulated so well. We need to do a lot more of these things. I think the challenge is with us in WAC and in writing studies, we don't have the money either. That's the problem. We're also really, really struggling, and we need to direct those resources to those places for sure. But ultimately, our resources are just very limited anyway. So I think the challenge is just a really big one. I think what I was trying to say in the first, as you mentioned, Beth, what I was trying to say about faculty in the first instance, I think that absolutely can be applied throughout the curriculum, and we can try and get students a little bit earlier on. But of course, that requires administrator support. It requires some resources, and hopefully a lot of resources, but it requires at least some. So those are challenges that are ongoing ones.
All right, perfect. That says thank you. Do you have any questions? Okay, there's no more questions from anyone in person, and I think our one online person has left. So.
Well, thank you for coming, those of you in person. I'm sorry we couldn't be there in person. I really am. It's not the same on Zoom, and I'm very grateful to you for showing up and listening, and please feel free to stay in touch. My email is jsjohnson@miami.edu, and that will remain in perpetuity regardless of where I'm at. So please, if you need to be in touch with me, please do so.
Likewise, yeah, I appreciate the attention and the questions, and do reach out if you'd like to connect. My email is on the slides, but tpolk2@gmu.edu.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.